Mark, man, thanks for coming on here. Really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. It's also been a little while since we're able to catch up. I feel like we're like ships passing in the night. Like we always just sort of like have these little points where we touch base and then
There's
we
limited
sort of drift
windows for
apart.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And it's either you're just getting up or I'm just going to bed or whatever it is. I really appreciate your friendship and stuff. So even when it is limited, I know that we've been able to connect on, highs, lows, and all of everything in between with this whole coaching thing.
Yeah, well,
So
that's what I mean. It's like I enjoy talking to you. I like catching up with you, but it's like I
yeah,
can never find the right time. It's like, it's so frustrating. I
totally.
like talking to
Uh,
Mark. Yeah.
yeah.
How's everything going for you, man?
Everything's going really well. It's been, I think we just mentioned before, there's highs and lows with a lot of this stuff, but the trend is really, really promising and business
Mhm.
has been growing and helping more people. And
Yeah.
for anyone that doesn't know about me, I've been a nutrition and strength coach for 10 years. And in the last, I would say probably 2 years, have put a consistent effort into my coaching program, which is more business to business focused for
Mhm.
other coaches and educational opportunities. So the last little bit's been focused on that and it's been growing and it's been really, really exciting.
And you're also, I'm not sure if it's current title, but you were assistant coach on the
Yeah.
Canadian Powerlifting Team.
Oh, I've been head coach for 3
Head
international
coach. Sorry,
teams. Yeah.
apologies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's okay. I was assistant coach for the open team 2 times and head coach for the masters team 3 times
Yeah.
for classic worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Do you
Yeah.
compete anymore?
I haven't. When did I compete last? I think I did. I did our last nationals in 2020, just bench only though, and I've been doing bench only in equipment the last 2 nationals, just because it was a lot to wrap my head around doing 3 lift. Although I really like deadlifting, but it
Well,
just
there's like
easier
it's
with
the day is more fun, in my opinion, when you just do
totally
bench only, right? Like you just show
yeah.
up, high five everyone. It's a good vibe. You warm up real quick, and then your day's done.
Completely. It's really nice for that. And I just found like slugging away with like 10 to 16 athletes over 6 days.
Mm.
I was having a hard time wrapping my head around doing the competition aspect again while juggling the rest of it. And usually just one thing kind of, goes by the wayside, and it would typically be my lifting, just because that's how I operate. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it gets discouraging, just gets tiring after a while. And it's like, maybe I'll just wait till the next one where I can focus a bit more on myself.
Yeah.
And let this kind of be more about my athletes type thing. So
Mm.
that's what I try to do. And I juggled it for the longest time and enjoyed that aspect, but kind of just doing a little bit less competing, but still really enjoying lifting. Like
Yeah.
I love
I mean,
lifting.
for the people that will watch the video version of this on YouTube, they'll be able to see the 300 odd kilos of plates behind
Yeah,
you in your room
totally.
there. Yeah.
Such an overset again. I didn't load up the bench to something that I would never be able to press, but just for the
You
photo,
just got to,
just for the optics. But
yeah,
yeah, no, yeah,
just got to chuck a shirt on then.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah. Do
yeah,
equipped bench only is the next horizon for you.
totally. No, I've done quite a bit of equipped.
Yeah. That's what
Yeah,
I want to be doing. I want to do at least like a meet at the end of the year, even if it just ends up being, I don't know, some Mickey Mouse meet at the end of the year
yeah,
where I can just chuck the shirt on and see what's there, like really get after it. But a lot of people, I guess, unless you've done equipped lifting or you're halfway familiar with it, don't realize that it's very different, right? Like you can't just throw a shirt on and it'll suddenly just like boing. Like there's a real
no,
technique and a real
yeah.
touch to it.
Especially, well, people, it's a slippery slope because you get in equipment and it does provide some benefit. And typically, the more expensive and aggressive equipment you get in to get that benefit, the harder it is to use. So it's like
Mm.
a very slippery slope in terms of what you're going to get out of it. And everyone wants to go to, the most intense shirt or suit right away because you're going to get more out of it. And it just becomes harder and harder to, the window in terms of your technique is just so much smaller. So it
Yeah.
is very, very difficult. When I started lifting though, and I don't want to be like go down the dinosaur route, but it was
No,
all
do it.
equipped. It was
Yeah.
all equipped. So you didn't really, if you wanted to be competitive, you really didn't have a choice. Like we were getting into it right away. I showed up at my first like true powerlifting gym in 2008, and they had me in gear within like days because there was a competition coming up. So it was like,
Awesome.
get in it, get in this. I didn't get in a bench shirt, but I was in wraps and a squat suit and stuff. And yeah, it was like, that was the Tuesday. And by Saturday, I was doing what I could to make sense of it all. But that's kind of what you did, right? Is if you didn't have equipment, you were just at a major disadvantage. So that's kind of how it all started. And then when classic, as you know, it was becoming, you know, acknowledged as being raw and another separate entity in itself came along, I just needed to get stronger as it was. So it was just a natural progression into some of the raw stuff.
What do you think of that approach? Like just put it on and figure it out.
I'm very analytical and hesitant, and I question everything. So sometimes throwing yourself in the fire is literally the only thing I can do to take action around stuff. So yeah. I think it was perfect for me. And I, you know that too, right? You hear it all the time in terms of, oh, I'm going to wait until I do this to compete, or I'm going to wait until that. And it's like, just do it. So I know I identified at one point that the weak point for me was getting stronger outside of the equipment. And that was a natural progression. And hopefully, you know, if you have good people in your corner, they can identify that for you and push you in the right direction. But yeah, man, I think, you know, I think the stoic approach is just do it and figure it out later.
Yeah. You know, it's like Richard Branson kind of says, this was before he started trying to build rockets to fly into space, was that if an opportunity ever presents itself, seize the opportunity and just figure it out later. It's like you will always be able to figure it out, but you won't always be able to seize on an opportunity.
For sure. That's why I think, saying yes is really, really important, and taking what's in front of you and just, you know, going into those sort of situations open-minded, but also with like a rough plan, but having low expectations is like all you can really do. I think that's when we really learn and grow. So
do you think that like more, because it's like you look at powerlifting, and sometimes I have to catch myself doing this, right? Where I'm trying to steer myself away from it as much as possible, but then you don't want to go too far to one end, where you could say one end, it's like, oh, just compete straight away, no one cares. And then on the other end, it's like, no, like things have to be right. Like you want to make sure that you do well, and everything has to go to a plan, and everything has to be accounted for. And I'm just finding like there's always that little bit of a struggle there. And I find that, I don't know, I feel like the industry is maybe overcorrected towards the conservative end. And now it seems to be creating a lot of anxiety in people when they do eventually compete. Like, what do you think about that? I mean, that's what I've seen. But like, what do you think? Because you've been doing this longer than I have, much longer.
The pendulum definitely, when like it swings, right? It tends to overcorrect and go so far in the other direction and stuff. I think people that gravitate towards individual sports in general probably have a tendency to be a bit more controlling than others, right? Like they want to make sure that all the variables have been accounted for and just have a type A personality to begin with. So I think the people that just participate in this stuff gravitate towards it. And that's where I think we've seen more, I don't want to say like true athletes, but when they come into the sport and have been a little less type A and just do really, really well with just like raw natural talent, we're always kind of like, we just see the potential and stuff. So part of me always thinks about those individuals that just like get after it and do it as, you know, something that's important. I think the biggest thing being your first meet, there's so much stuff like procedural to go through that you should just do it to begin with no expectations, right? Like, but by the time you get your lot number and weigh in and eat something and, you know, get to warm ups and stuff, there's a lot of steps that have
especially
nothing to do.
You know, if you miss weight as well, like maybe you weigh in, you miss weight, maybe it doesn't go super smooth. Maybe you forget your ID card, right? Like then what do you do?
timing of warm-ups and all this
Yep.
stuff. And a lot of people, you know, like maybe they don't have the best support to begin with and aren't being coached and stuff, which I think is a pretty similar, like is a pretty, you know, that happens to a lot of people. It's a common thing to happen. There's a lot of stuff that you just got to like work through and experience, right, with low expectations. So I think if you wait for all that stuff to be perfect for you to have the perfect scenario to express your strength, you'll just end up disappointing yourself because.
Yeah, I agree. Like, what do you think in your experience from having looked at it? Like, what have you found that newer lifters are least prepared for in that first meet environment?
Just the cadence of things, and the fact that, you know, there's no do-overs, right? That's one of the things that actually I was always kind of surprised me about CrossFit, which I do like in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways I kind of shake my head, is that, you know, they would go into the CrossFit Open and redo workouts and stuff, right? Like you don't get the best time, then 2 days later you're trying it again. Whereas in competitive sports, there's no do-overs, right?
Yeah,
so
there's no mulligan,
I think, yeah, you don't get a really chance to, if you don't have that experience, you don't have the cadence of hearing your name called, going there, setting up, doing things the exact same way. Like if you haven't practiced getting commands, and not just like commands of your handoff person, but getting a handoff person to work the bench out, like, you know, pass the bench off to you, you hold it, then the referee give you commands. There's an entire practice aspect of the cadence of the sport that just goes completely overlooked. So it's that stuff that I think you just got to get in and go to a meet, right? For me, if I have an athlete and there's a competition on the schedule that they can attend, we're doing it. We got to do it. You just got to get out there, because I think, I mean, you don't have to be peaked for it or anything, but the value there is just going through the cadence of the sport. Yeah.
Yeah. I think even things like warm-up room etiquette, right? Like I think that a lot of people in a newer setting in their first meet won't know how to handle themselves in the warm-up room. It's like, you got to be confident enough to say, hey, I'm on 2 people from now. I need to hit my final warm-up like right now. Like, you know, can I get in on this? Instead of just like sitting back and letting other people, you know, run the show, because they will. Like it's not a rudeness thing. If you don't speak up, they're just going to keep doing their thing. So you need to know how to do those like little things. I've seen a lot of equipment sort of errors, like wardrobe malfunctions on the days as well. Like little details, especially if it's maybe a smaller meet. You'll often have experienced refs, but you might not have a technical controller. So it just depends on how many refs and officials are available or volunteers are available. So adjusting your wraps on the platform, or, you know, forgetting your mouth guard is in your shirt. I did that, right? Like I'm an experienced lifter, and I like had my mouth guard hanging on my shirt, walked onto the platform. They're like, you've got your mouth guard in your shirt. So, all right, picked it up, went, put it in my mouth. Like, no, you have to walk off the platform. And so I had to walk off the platform, put it in my mouth, walk back in, and then do that. And then by the time I did that, I've only got like 25 seconds left to take my squat. And then it's like, it starts to cook. And so all of those things are so important, like all these like little details, right?
For sure.
So if we wind the clock back 10 years, because I've never really had an opportunity to speak to you about this, but if we wind the clock back 10 years, like what got you into dietetics? Like what was the thing that pushed you into dietetics? Because I don't think I've ever talked to you about it.
So my story around this stuff is like just really involved in high school sports and wanting to improve at that stuff. I just been, I guess, a quote unquote, like hard worker my entire life. So I don't know, as someone that wanted to put effort into something and see the result of your hard work, the aspect of like training and food and nutrition just became really, really appealing to me. So I was kind of like just hooked on it immediately, and always like kind of, I don't know, I was a bright kid, but didn't really have any, you know, real firm plans. Maybe I would go become a teacher or something like that. So I applied to a general science program at a university that, you know, my friends were going to because I wanted the social aspect. And they put me in the chemistry program, just like almost randomly. And I stuck with it. I don't even know why. I really wasn't. I was enjoying it enough that like the first year was pretty general, but after that, but even during that time, I was just hooked on the weight room. I like hung out in there more often than I did in like, you know, in the lab or like paying attention to stuff. I had some good people around me that like kind of helped me through, which was like good, but also bad in the fact that I wasn't in the place where I fit in for the stuff I was supposed to be doing. So it was a bit frustrating, but I remember being super interested in the nutrition and training aspect. And there's really no like you either go into kinesiology or you go into like a health profession. There's no like, you know, there's no set program for someone that wants to become a coach. Yep. Right. There's no like set path. So I remember seeing John Berardi speak in like 2006, and he gave this like wonderful talk on sports nutrition. And I remember trying to get the balls to ask him, like, how do I become you at the end of the talk? And at this point, like, I'm not the person I am now. I was just not a confident individual. That scenario probably really, really freaked me out, asking that sort of question. And I didn't ask, but some lady in the audience asked for her son. It's like, if someone wanted to do something that you were doing, how would you go about that? And he gave
I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah. So no, but that's what this lady asked for her son. She's like, you know, how would you do that? And he gave an answer kind of like, you know, you go to university, you read all the books, you spend a bunch of time, and maybe you can do it. And that just did not sit well with me because it was not practical enough. But I remember at that point, like the letters behind his name were PhD, CSCS. And I was like, I need to copy this. That's all I want, those letters. Yeah. That's if I can do that, it'll be, you know, a good start. So I finished my first degree, was lucky enough to get out of there, applied for grad school in nutrition, started my master's, really liked what I was doing, saw kind of the end game around getting a doctorate in nutrition, so that I could, you know, have some credentials to teach the stuff and the stuff that I liked doing. But then again, like I was in the same spot where I was like, I want to make this more practical and applied. And I taught university courses in metabolism and you know, like applied nutrition and stuff. But even still, I was like, I want to help individuals. I want to build business through it and stuff. So that's kind of like how the came about it. And at that point, I was still really hooked on lifting. And then when I discovered in powerlifting that this is a separate sport that people compete in, they just don't train. They don't use it to train for other sports. I was hooked, and started lifting, and it kind of was just like a concurrent thing that I was doing the whole time.
Yeah, you probably, I mean, being an equipped powerlifting, like you said, like when you came in, everything was equipped. There was probably a lot of chocolate milk and bacon sandwiches being eaten as well. So I imagine
there was just, I don't think there was much attention being paid to any of it at all at the beginning. And it was, and like things have changed a lot in terms of like now athletes are competing in it. Right. And I don't know if it's the trend between like, oh, this is something that I can do that's getting a bit of notoriety that I literally just don't have to punish myself doing in the same way, like at least the head trauma, right? Is the biggest thing. Like I'm not going to just get my head kicked in as often. So maybe I'll do that. But like the athletes started showing up, and I think just the pursuit of greater knowledge in this area and doing things that, you know, is based on science that actually work just came along. And it's really been quite a bit of a revolution. And I think the whole face of powerlifting has changed because it's just a lot of unathletic, sweaty dudes at the beginning, really, in reality. Myself included, as the leader of that. And yeah, it's just, I think it's changed completely.
What do you think have been the most remarkable changes to you in that regard?
People wanting to do stuff that works, be it, you know, like we've seen like the popularity and growth of like RTS and like evidence-based like training practices, right? Like people following programs, that stuff. When I first started in the powerlifting gym I was in, we'd go in and we would just follow what everyone else was doing. right? Like it was like, today we're going to work up to, we got a competition coming up in 3 weeks. Like you're taking heavy squats on Mondays. That's because that's what everyone does. Right. So it's like, work up to the heaviest squat you can. If you fail, that's disappointing. If not,
if
great,
he does,
kind of thing. Right. But no one had like an individualized program. No one had any of that stuff. We just were kind of like, I wouldn't say it was blind following the blind, but I remember when I first started, I was getting really into the science of nutrition, and almost to a fault in terms of, this is back when like the emphasis was on meal timing and eating clean and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And this first group of guys I showed up with, there was a lot of master lifters, but they have been doing stuff for 20, 30 years, lifting heavy deadlifts as heavy as they could go every Friday. And then they would go in the garage and drink Coors Light. And I was thinking like,
yes,
for me, it was a bit eye-opening, because I was thinking, hey, maybe there's more to this than just getting everything right. Right. There's that aspect. And I'm thinking, but also there's so much room for improvement on what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a really good point. In the, I feel like
they would stop deadlifting. They'd get the baby powder off and they'd go right to the garage. Like there was no protein shake. It'd be
I love that.
I love it too. Well, because like you just shoot the shit, and like, yeah, it was just
like Stone Cold Steve Austin, some beers, right? Just like,
exactly.
Like
exactly. It was a lot of that. They just like, they'd lift weights and they'd play softball and they would just enjoy their lives and stuff. And to me, that was like a different experience and take on a strength sport, and more or less, I don't know, just kind of like a little bit more no nonsense, which I think, as we talked about the pendulum swinging, sometimes it goes too far in the other direction.
Yeah.
We're overanalyzing everything, right?
I think if I'm going to be honest with you, in my opinion, I think we're in the middle of a big pendulum swing. Like, sorry, not in the middle. Like, we're at one end right now. We're in like the information education end, and we've moved like completely away from the simplicity end. And I'm not saying that one is more valuable than the other. I'm just saying the thing is swinging all the time.
Yeah.
Something that I've definitely noticed, and something that I personally really appreciate about your approach to nutrition, is the simplicity, right? Like, and simplicity doesn't necessarily mean, you know, based on your level of experience, I can only imagine that you are very much leaving no stone unturned, but it's like there's an order, right? Like, you're not playing everything all at once. Like, there's big rocks and little rocks, and then the really small sandy stuff. So like, coming from seeing that in powerlifting, you said that there was a lot of room for improvement there, but you said, you know, you kind of still wanted to keep that simple approach. Like, how did you go about starting to develop that? What's been your focus in doing that? Like, just keeping it simple this entire time? Like, what's been the evolution of that?
The simplicity of it. And I've always been really observational and tried to do my best to listen to whoever will speak to me, really, in terms of, you know, what are you doing? What are you focusing on? And then just noticing trends. And I think that's what, you know, the hierarchies of evidence and like the pyramids for strength and training were just so pivotal in giving people context. Right. And a good example that I have in my own practice was when I really started getting into weight cutting practices, specifically, you know, like short and long-term nutritional approaches for people to make weight. And this is where like evidence-based stuff just like kind of misses the mark, is that you'd read some of these resources and they would tell you every single thing possibly that you could do to make weight without any real context for what you should be doing, depending where you are in relation to your weight class. Right. It was like the kitchen sink of things. So it was like, you know, what do I need to be doing right now that's going to give me the most of my results, and just assessing those sort of trends so that I can learn to apply that to people. Because the people that we're going to be working with, if we're lucky, they like this stuff as much as we do, but really they want the result of it. So if we can focus on what's going to give them the majority of the results and make sure they're adhering to that, we're just, as practitioners, above and beyond what everyone else is doing. And I think that's one of the biggest things, right? Is that, are we measuring signals for the sake of collecting data that we aren't going to use? And does that just provide noise to us, or does it actually allow us to make meaningful decisions. And I think that's where a lot of stuff gets missed, is that when you routinely see yourself using science and data to make meaningful stuff, that's great. But when it actually is just, you're just collecting it for the sake of collecting it, or learning it for the sake of learning it and not applying it, it just becomes noise, and it should be discarded because it's just clogging things up.
Yeah. It's like how many shows are on Netflix and how many shows do you actually watch? There's like 10,000 things on there, and you probably watch 3 of them.
Totally. And the same goes, that in terms of entertainment, but even knowledge. We have more knowledge readily accessible to us than we've ever had before.
Yeah, than ever.
The figure around YouTube. I think, like literally like thousands of hours of content is uploaded to YouTube like every minute, and you're never going to access all of that and anything. And one good example around that was, I was really big into measuring my HRV in like 2012. And I remember one coach that I had, Neil Katchuk.
Oh, Neil. I know Neil.
Yeah, Neil. Yeah, from Regina. Yeah. I remember telling him, like, do you want this? Do you want this information? And I thought maybe, like, as someone that's both curious about this stuff, he'd be interested in it. And he's like, no, I don't. I was like, why don't you want it? He's like, well, I'm not going to use it. So it's just not worth for me to collect it right now, because when we do, it adds burden to both sides. It makes me interpret stuff I'm not going to use, and it makes the client collect stuff that isn't actually useful. And that stuff just kind of all starts weighing you down. Right. So I remember that being interesting. And then I remember one of the big meets I was competing for, the day of the competition, I woke up and I got my absolute worst readiness score. And I remember thinking, well, this sucks. Like, what do I do
game
now?
over. Yeah.
Right. And I remember that moment being like, that was just like a pivotal moment in terms, like, there's more to this than that. And now I just got to move forward with the short memory, because there's nothing I can do about that now. Right.
It's also like, you mentioned context, and you mentioned like meaningful interpretations of that data. Because when we look at any one thing in too much specificity, we lose context of where that thing is, right? Like, if I tell anyone to just pick one word, I'm like, just say the word, I don't know, cheese 1,000 times over and over and over again, it completely loses meaning. So you're always going to have your worst readiness score the morning of a meet. I've never slept well the morning, like the night before a meet, like never. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to be able to compete. It's just what happens, right? Yeah. Like, it's just like, that's the thing. And I think that's like, you mentioned weight cutting. And we've seen, I don't know if it happens as much now, but it's certainly something that I have to speak to newer lifters about, because they seem obsessed with weight cutting. And there's a difference between like cutting well, like, but like you said, you can eat spinach smoothies for 3 days before you meet. You'll cut weight. You're probably not going to feel very good, and you're probably not going to perform very well. So, like, how do you approach that situation with people, guiding their nutrition, and they tell you, hey, I want to cut, I don't know, I want to cut weight. Like, what are your rules of thumb there, Mark? And how do you go about that? Like, when do you believe too much weight is, or when do you believe a cut is too much, and guide them to go up? And how do you really start to talk people through that process if they are committed to doing it?
So, like, current clients, like I'm measuring, trends of body weight, and typically, like, someone that's pretty experienced should be able to drop 3% of their body weight relatively, with variables that aren't going to impact their performance very much, be it like food volume and sodium, and we'll be able to change some stuff and make it. Anything past that becomes more problematic. And I've worked with athletes like Connor Lutz, for example, would routinely be able to cut like 6 or 7% body weight and just have like that Rocky mentality that he's focused, it wasn't going to bother him. And his performance was from my perspective, quite unaffected. Maybe like we'll never know if he could have done better if he didn't, but generally unaffected. Right. So that 1 to 3% seems to be the sweet spot for most intermediate athletes that I'm working with. And those are the things that we focus on instead of doing forced sweating and depleting glycogen and stuff that's just going to have a bigger impact on performance. So that to me is like, here's a hierarchy of stuff that impacts our performance least. Here's the hierarchy of stuff that is going to impact you a little bit more. We're not going to use the stuff that's going to crush us unless we absolutely need to, depending on the situation. Now, a bit of a curveball, Sam, and this might surprise you.
Go for it.
I think everyone should cut weight for the first powerlifting competition.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never heard somebody say that, so please.
I'm saying it just because it's the opposite of what everyone says. But no, this is more, if someone is asking you if they should cut weight for their first powerlifting meet, they are going to do it with or without you. They've decided already that this is the best fit for you. And it doesn't matter if you have a PhD in nutrition or you've been competing for 15 years, they're doing it with or without you. So as someone that truly believes in hazard reduction, I feel like giving them the tools to do it in the best possible way that limits the impact on their performance and makes them healthy, to me, is the best approach. Because I know if someone asks me if they should be doing keto, if someone asks me if they should be cutting weight, if someone asks me if they should be taking this supplement, there's a very good chance their mind is already made up, regardless. Yeah, they're just regardless of the convincing. Yeah, they're looking for validation around this thing. So I can't tell you how many times, someone that I'm not currently working with would ask me this, and then I would tell them, you absolutely shouldn't be doing that. It makes no sense. And then I see them, 2 weeks later at the meet looking like a zombie, and there's red all over the board because they've, went 3 for 9 because they did it anyway.
Yeah.
So purely on a psychological basis, I think we got to think of like, what are they going to do with or without us, where they're coming from, and what makes the most sense for them. And sometimes people got to learn lessons kind of the tough way.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think I hate to say collecting data for the sake of collecting it, but we're starting to see in this sport, there's people that are just hobbyists to begin with. So who am I to say that, you going after this junior provincial record isn't worth it for you based on my view that you should be in this for 10 years and love it as much as I do. Yeah. Right. So I don't know. There's just like so much to it. But those are people that I guess I'm not working with. Once, I've built up rapport and trust and am guiding them down a path that fits within a bigger picture, we're taking more stuff into consideration. But in my experience, the people that are just asking you stuff to kind of get validation or get your nod of approval that they're really not going to take into consideration unless it's a yes, then we might need to approach those conversations a little bit differently. Yeah.
It's almost like all you should really be doing as a coach is presenting people with the options, right? And then I always try to look at coaching as more of a relationship where you're fostering a decision-making process between the two of you.
Yeah.
And, I would always be inclined to say, nah, I mean, look, you can, but, this will probably happen, or you feel like this. I think it's really similar in like gauging RPE. You tell somebody like, hit an RPE 7 set of 5, and then they're just like, really getting after it week after week, and they're just like crushing themselves. You're like, okay, like the bar speed's still moving, but I'm telling you, in a couple of weeks, you're not going to feel so great. They're like, no, I've got it. And then, they eventually they learn, right? Like they sort of, like you said, redline themselves, and then they learn. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. And it's not like we're trying to punish them, but like you said, sometimes people just have to learn. That's okay.
Yeah. That's been my experience. And that actually kind of lends itself to the nuance and context and gray area conversation, is that I don't know if people really understand that until they experience it.
Yeah.
I think experience is a much better teacher for those sort of situations. When someone's like, I want to cut my carbs down way low because I think that's what's best for me. And you're like, okay, well, I don't the evidence doesn't suggest that. And maybe you do want to do that, but maybe we'll just bump your protein up, and because we know that's going to be helpful regardless, and we'll see how it goes. And then, week 3 comes around, they're like, I feel like shit. And I was like, I told you would. Right. I didn't, we did say that. Do you want to try this my way now? And in my experience, they're, once they've realized that you are on their team and there are experience, I think experience can be one of the best teachers, especially when, people just need to go through that stuff. You can preach to them all you want. Right.
Yep. For sure. What are the effects, like, what, like, on a deeper level, what are the consequences of glycogen depletion in a short-term weight cut, or hydration depletion? Like, what are people going to be looking at actually affecting? What are the things that affect performance when people do that?
The biggest thing is, well, like tapping into your energy stores, as well as like the hydration that comes along with storing additional carbohydrate, right? So it's twofold. Like you'll be literally flat because you just won't have as much energy. And I think, when we study this stuff in isolation, strength sports are on, in terms of those energy pathways, it is quick stuff, and it does utilize like we're talking about the ATP cycle. Maybe you don't need to pull from glycogen as much, but at the same time, you're at this for like 3.5 hours of like warming up, intense activity. Like it's not just what happens during a tough rep, right? It's the entire extent of it. So there's the energy perspective as well as the hydration aspect that can be pretty tough. So if we can avoid that, we should be able to avoid that and be able to drop around 3% of our body weight by just looking at some of those variables that are a little bit less performance, a little bit less detrimental to performance. And I think a lot of this stuff stemmed towards like, hey, this is something that will bring my weight down quick, so I should do it. But also we see it in 24-hour weight class athletes and people doing more aggressive stuff that's been sort of, I don't know, sensationalized, I guess you could say, by like, I don't know, UFC fighters and stuff and that type of stuff. But they have, an extended period of time to rehydrate and recomp. Whereas athletes in,
it's like
2 hour weight
2 hour
class
weight,
sports, like you just don't, like you're about to do it. And, sometimes you got to look at someone like, they're about to start their deadlifts and they look at you and they're like, I'm finally coming back to life. And you're like, I told you it'd be like this. I tried to make it pretty clear, but you're going
to be affected by the order that you're lifting in too, right? So if you're doing like a hard cut and you are opening heavy, you'll probably be okay because you're lifting later in the order, but then you might also be a little rocky because if warm-ups aren't going well, your window of opportunity is shrinking to be able to change your openers and stuff. So there's always a trade-off.
If there's, that's where like, having someone that understands the procedure of the sport and kind of has an in and around, like, what meet are you doing? Is there multiple flights? Like, are you going to be, are you going to be in the second flight? Like, do you have an additional half an hour? Like, when is this weigh-in, right? Like all that stuff does play into stuff, which is again, why people just need to get out there and lift so that they have a better idea of the procedure of that stuff.
So with the idea of like get out there and lift and really taking a more, I guess, like fundamental approach to people's nutrition, a lot of the time, in my mind, I see Instagram being particularly obsessed with like more and more minute details of things lately. Like I remember seeing a post even recently about nutrition. It was like, just because you're asymptomatic doesn't mean you don't have a gut problem. And I was like, what? Like, what does that mean? And then, it's like everybody's now getting into gut, microbiomes and flora and, flora, fauna, whatever you want to, I don't even know. Like, what do you make of that? Like, why do you think we're seeing that? And like, how do you feel about that as someone of your experience and working with as many people as you have? Like, where do you see the merit and where do you think it's going wrong?
Yeah, well, I think about the thing about like the scientific method is like, that's how we establish the best take on what we know and knowledge, and it's something that adds to it. And the study of the bacteria that colonize our guts is just like so incredibly new. And when the experts are telling us, like, we really don't know much about this stuff yet. Like, even like, in terms of like probiotics, like, we don't know which ones have this like intended effect, or if it's actually going to do anything. The evidence is limited or conflicting. Like, we really don't know that much. And then you get on Instagram and say, like, this is going to fix everything to do with your health. And like, it's the missing thing. It's just, again, just
like it's healing properties, right?
Yeah.
This
It's
thing
misleading.
has healing properties.
Part of me thinks it stems from people that are trying to make a name for themselves and make it a little bit different, and feel as if they can't do the stuff that has got them where they are, or they feel like they'll be copying their mentors or any of that stuff. Like, when you first get into this stuff, you're like, I can't write a blog post on that. That's been written about so many times. Right. Yep. It's like, well, yeah, it has, because we know it really well. It's like been, it's a foundational principle and stuff. So part of me thinks it's like the new thing, gut health, mindset, the link between that, all of those things, like stuff, just data for the sake of data, people measuring their blood glucose that have no blood sugar issues at all. It's like, oh man, like I just, like, great if you want, but I think you're going down this path of controlling for things that might not need to be controlled, or if at best you're going to be getting feedback signals that might not give you a true reflection of what's going on. So it's
it's like Freakonomics, right? You remember that book, Freakonomics? Great book.
Yeah,
but
totally.
What he really goes into is that you can draw a correlation between literally anything, like anything. You can draw a correlation between the most like separate, like disparate points of data, and you'll find a way to join them.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, it's a really good point. I actually was thinking about, like a similar book, like all of the Malcolm Gladwell series, where it's just like, he just did a really good job of taking numbers and painting a story and not working backwards. Right. It's like, here's the story I want to tell. Let's use numbers to support that. Right. And I think, to each their own, but that's not how science works, right?
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. So it's like kind of going backwards. So to me, I think it's the biggest thing is that people are trying to like establish themselves and just getting a bit ahead of what we know. And again, the thing about science is that just because we don't know it yet doesn't mean it isn't true. We might just haven't studied it in the right way, or like, I don't know, to me, that's a bit humbling and adds a bit of humility to it, because, some things might be right. And that, that might be part of it. And maybe people are ahead of the curve and stuff, but that's just not how that works. Right.
Yeah. It's like even if you are ahead of the curve, you don't know that yet. Like you don't actually know that. You don't have the evidence to support that. So I think maybe a bit of humility on both sides would probably be really beneficial to the people that are going to, ultimately the people that we're trying to coach and work with, right? Yep. Like what do you find that does mentally to people in your experience when we do focus too much? Like, what is that sort of client experience?
Okay. I thought you were going to go with maybe down the coaches part, because I think for coaches, it gives,
we can do coaches. Yeah.
Well, it gives the dumb ones opportunities, and it gives the smart ones, paralysis by analysis. Yeah. So like, part of me thinks the intelligent coaches that think it's something now wrong with the way they're approaching it and they need more education should take a lesson out of the books of the people that are just acting on stuff and going ahead of it, and vice versa, right? Where it's like, maybe you don't know as much as you do, and you should stick to what you know. And I've had conversations with people like coaches right now that like are just, they're trying to niche down in an area that is purely just different from them, and they're trying to make connections and stuff. And what they did to get where they are is just entirely different. It's like, no, you should focus on what has worked for you. And we know in terms of the scientific approach, right? Like, why are you doing gut protocols on someone when you've done like flexible dieting and it's changed your life?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you're just trying to be different for the sake of being different. So that part is tough for the coach to overcome, as well as for the client, again, it's probably one of those things where we've come so far into adding context to what works. And I just think it adds more cloudiness to this relationship between what we eat and how it impacts how we perform and how we look and how we overall feel. So it just becomes more confusing for the end user.
What would be your, I guess, like counter argument or response to someone that maybe says that it's too simple approach, right? Like macros, no, you're missing the bigger picture. It's too simple. We need to look at this stuff. Like what is your counter argument to that?
I think, well, I'm getting in the brain of someone that does like come after that. I think the tendency is to like, when you focus on one thing, everyone automatically assumes that everything else you're not talking about is no longer important. Right. Which is just,
it's a good point.
It's like, no, that's not what I was getting at all. Right. And again, just being able to communicate, and that is partially on the coach's fault, is that like, maybe, we do have blind spots, or we are trying to simplify things too much. And that's just part of it. But I think when we're talking to, to consumers and clients, we got to get as simple as possible. Right. And I've talked about this in details. Like we focus on what and why and not how, because everyone wants to put out all of this informational, educational content that really is explaining how we do our jobs. And the people that really need our help don't really care about that. They want to focus on what you eat impacts your ability to lose fat, and you should focus on that. Like that's the story, right? Like that is it over and over again. Proof of that, reiterating that ad nauseum, like that's the thing. So it's just like, it's kind of going into that. So I think the biggest thing being like, there's aspects of simple as being not sexy and not new, but I think that just comes down to it's a marketing problem, and you need to put that at the paramount, right? Like that you need to make sure that people know why this is the most important. And there's ways to do that through still being ethical and scientific and stuff. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that people forget like psychology is a branch of science too, right?
Yeah. It's still a science. And things are weighed and measured. I think it's really important that like I enjoy seeing this content from people like you, some, maybe a couple of other people, like you mentioned, John Berardi, another person that I think of is like Spencer Nadolski, and you're all doctors. So I think maybe we should just listen to that. Maybe, there might be some weight to that thought. So
I appreciate that a lot, but I mean, there is like definitely, there's a depth of expertise around this certain things. And I don't think everyone doesn't need to gravitate, to accomplishing those type of stuff. Because I think at the same time that, that can set you back if you want to be a coach, right? Like, I think like it's not, that isn't the path to get there either, but it's just one of those things where, I feel like
it's more like you don't necessarily need to appeal to authority, but maybe if you consider how much study and how long it actually takes to achieve a doctorate, and if these people that have done that much study in the actual like hard sciences branch and also have experience with working one-on-one with people are saying these things, then maybe give that a bit more credence than the sexier stuff just because someone happens to be saying it on Instagram and they have X, Y, and Z amount of followers. It's like assess your assessors. Like what is your system of attributing value? Maybe that's what you need to assess when you're considering what you think is good information and what isn't.
Totally. I think we've come so far in being able to assess what is good information. And that's coming from a place where like literally it almost felt like for you to manage your own nutrition as a strength athlete, it was like some giant checklist that you pretty much had to like tick off. Right. Whereas like it got to the point where it's like, some of this stuff is more important than others. Let's just focus on that versus, it being pass fail around the entire checklist. Right. So it's kind of like, it's that stuff. And we come so far, but it's almost like, people are almost lashing out at the fact that you've made this so simple that they're, now going in the other direction in terms of like, no, there's all this stuff you need to focus on.
Yeah. I think we're seeing that in powerlifting too, right? Like that we did oversimplify squat, bench, and deadlift to the point where we now are overcomplicating it. And I find myself falling into both camps. Like I'm just backflipping all the time where I'm like, no, keep it simple. The biomechanics is really important. And now I'm at a point where I'm just like, my knowledge of biomechanics, my experience in working with people should only ever be trying to give the simplest answer possible at the time, right? Like that's all I'm ever really trying to think about is like, what is the most fundamental, simple answer I can give to this person in this moment without, just trim all the fat and give it to them. What's that thing? I think that's more important, in my opinion.
Totally. I would.
Yeah. So, what I always like to ask you a couple of questions at the ends of these things, Mark. But I guess there's another one, and somebody suggested it to me because I'm always trying to get feedback. I was like, give me some feedback. What do you think? They said this, and I really liked it. Is what is something that you wish you knew more about? Right? What is something that you really, really wish you could dive into more or start to expand your knowledge on as a really experienced coach? Like, what is that thing for you right now?
I really, over the last year, I've completely immersed myself in the business side of things from like more of a marketing perspective. And that's really kind of like, I don't know, lit a fire in me because I've always liked, number one, things that work. And in the business world, especially the online business world, there's so much, flash in the pan type stuff. And, I'd try anything out if you promise me a result, right? But it's the same thing. It's the same thing in terms of, okay, what are the fundamentals that we need to be doing to grow our businesses, leveraging things like social media? So I think I'm on the path right now to trying to figure out that aspect. But that would be the biggest thing is that like everyone teaches you, they want to teach you how to be a competent coach from a knowledge perspective, but the application of it to become a confident practitioner, a practitioner that gets better results for their clients, as well as uses those results to continue to grow their practices is kind of like on the path that, I'm trying to learn more about, not just for myself, but also for this community, because who wouldn't want to know more about how to reach more people and impact more people? And that's kind of what good business and marketing practices will do. Yeah.
I think a lot of coaches and health professionals, because that's like most of our listener base is a strength athlete, an allied health professional, or a coach, and often have a lot of difficulty as soon as you bring up business or finances. It's like, I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to do X, Y, Z. Like, what do you think that does for your coaching to learn the business and get more comfortable with the business?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of us, especially, we do this stuff because we're passionate about it. And we automatically feel uncomfortable when we start to think that we're leveraging our passion by,
like commodifying it. Yeah.
Or taking advantage of someone else or making money off it. It makes us really, really uncomfortable. For me, a lot of times it can be, if anything, it's just like a litmus test for, some aspects of how well you're doing. It's not perfect, but to grow your business and to make more money, you have more impact, you have more ability to impact other people. So to me, it's like, get over that as soon as you can. Like, like that aspect of that, because a lot of people just think, like, I'm here to be a practitioner, I'm here to coach. And it's like, no, you're here to reach and impact more people. And if you completely discredit the impact in business side of this, then you're actually going to be doing yourself a disservice and everyone around you.
You'll be reaching fewer people.
Yeah. And I mean, who wants to be the best coach that no one knows about? I think that part is problematic. So if you can go from the mindset shift of, I'm not selling someone something, I'm leveraging my skills and knowledge to help others. And through that, I make money doing it. It's just like a completely different ball game, right?
It's like a barber or, like anyone, like any service or skill-based trade.
Sure.
It's the same. So,
and I think the business aspect, I mean, we've all been harassed so much by business coaches that it's left a bad taste in our mouth, right?
Yeah.
Like it has, but so that aspect, but I think that's also what that does, like what that did was just like layer on the fact that like it was a weak spot to begin with for most practitioners. Now we have this bad taste in their mouth and people are just like turning it off entirely when it's like actually truly what they need to focus on.
Yeah. And like proper business, not I call it like guruism, where people are like pretending as though they have the keys to the kingdom when it's like, no, like I find that the people that I'm more drawn to listen to in business give out that information more freely, right? Like to me, it's more trustworthy, and they're not sort of shrouding it in mystery. That to me is always seems like a very sort of silly bait and switch tactic that I see from people, which I'm not about.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
So to finish off, what is something that you're currently seeing that you wish would go away, that you wish would disappear into the night and never come back?
This is such a, we were in such a small, like niche industry that you start to see these like camps and people, you know, getting after each other, that it's just like, it makes no sense at all. We're all in this to help. We're all in this to help people, and how we go about doing that can look different. And there's going to be professional differences, but I wish the whole, like, I don't know, the whole high school thing would go away. It feels like that at times. Yeah. So that's like part of me thinks that. I also think that like just people being open to approaching things differently and not just discrediting stuff because they don't understand it is something I wish would go away too.
Yeah. It's every single person I ask on this podcast, man, everybody says the same thing. Doesn't matter what field of coaching they're in. Everybody says the same thing. I just wish that would go away. And I really wish it would. I really wish it would. I just think it's so toxic. I think all it does is drive, this like really sort of primitive sense of tribalism into coaching, that you have to be in X, Y, and Z a camp.
Yeah.
I think it's borderline just, I don't know. It's like, it's not helping anyone. It's just not helping anyone. Not the person that's writing it, not the person that's hearing it, not the people that are on the fringes of that. Helps no one.
Yeah, for sure.
So what about?
I mean, we need to be part of communities and stuff. We do. It's not like we can't, like, but it's just that like
the communities can share with each other.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's something on the opposing end of that then that you're seeing that you are hoping will grow, thrive?
I really, there's nothing that lights me up more than seeing people that have, a natural passion and talent for this stuff grow and improve and share their gifts with others. So I think there's been a lot of that. We're getting diversification in the messages we're seeing. We're getting, different representation and stuff like that. Aspect is really, really good. When I started this stuff, we kind of started talking about powerlifting in 2008. I don't think there's literally like a handful of women competing in this stuff and lifting, and that's entirely changed, right?
Yep.
Is the biggest thing. I really wasn't planning on going there with this question, but there also seems to be, there's a narrative around, the person who's competed in something and is now coaching always seems to be the narrative around the negative aspect of that is always the bikini girl, right? I wish that would die. I'd really love that. I'd love that to be dead, because there's just as much meathead males that do the exact same thing, but aren't cast in that light that I would love to, like, maybe we should start making fun of them. Maybe that's.
So do you want it to die and go away, or do you just want to see more equal disdain?
Well, the pendulum swings the other way. I think maybe the immediate step is pointing out how hypocritical it is. Then it dies off.
Of course. Yeah.
But that part of me, like, it's always the, what are we upset about? It's not it's the butt shots, right? And there's not many men taking butt shots. It's always like the,
back shots.
Yeah. Well, no, it's they always talk about, the person that's taking butt shots and this influencer, yada, yada. And it's never like the shirtless selfies that males are doing. It seems to be very one-sided. So I'd love for that to die.
I think simultaneously we have this really crazy double standard. It's like people, when people are applying for jobs, and it's like, to apply for this job, you need to have experience in this job. And then we have coaches, and we roast coaches for doing a competition and then immediately saying that they're a coach. And we expect them to have this massive amount of experience, but you only get experience as a coach by coaching. So I think that there is a middle ground there that we maybe need to be more understanding of. And we can't just say, well, you need to go and hit the books for 10 years or else I won't listen to you, because then the people that only study, we don't listen to them because they don't have enough practical knowledge. And we'll say, no, you're not strong enough. So, and then the people that only have practical knowledge will say, no, you're not smart enough. It's like, fuck, just make up your mind.
Oh, totally. And you've been doing this for years. And if anyone, regardless of who they are, their background, came into your gym and they were hardworking and they wanted to learn and they wanted to become a coach, you would give them every opportunity to do so. You would invest in them. You'd give them freely everything you know. They don't think that at the time, but the people at the top are some of the most, gracious people that want to give back to things. I don't know. I remember my first couple of times golfing, and I haven't golfed very much, but I remember being so like, my buddies growing up were super into golf. They worked at golf courses all summer. They would, get in buddy with the pros. They would like, cut grass all year and play golf kind of thing. And I remember showing up being like, this is a whole new world to me, and like kind of being freaked out. And I remember thinking this one like golf pro is super cool dude. And I remember thinking he was going to judge me for my clubs and what I was doing and not knowing anything. And I remember him showing up and taking a club out of my bag right away. And I was like shitting myself. I was like, he's going to make fun of like my gear and what I'm doing, yada, yada. And I remember he went right up to the tee box and smacked a ball with it and like walked back and said, that's a pretty nice club. Right. And it was just like, I love this golf stuff. Like, he's like, I'm just out here. I love this golf stuff. I love that you're here wanting to share that, this love of this sport or this activity or whatever it is. It's like people at the top are like that. And we shouldn't drive the fear of not getting into it to the people at the bottom just because of these, I don't know, preconceived stuff. So it's a weird dynamic.
Yeah. Maybe if the more experienced people, by the sounds of it, or maybe like the most experienced people, like you said, it gives so freely, right? Like they just give so freely. They don't care because they've got nothing to prove. And so the people that are in the middle are the people that are often, like I've said, holding the keys to the kingdom and sort of gatekeeping everybody else. And then the people that are very new are very defensive because they're just trying to carve out their own spot. It's like, maybe if we just let everybody have a seat at the table within reason. I'm not saying listen to every single crazy opinion out there, because there are some wild ones. Like, you still need to have discourse with people, right? Yeah. If somebody says something that is completely off base, you need to talk to them about it. But again, it's like, you need to talk to them about it, right? Like that's probably the biggest thing. It's like, talk to them, talk to people, talk to these people and help them and offer them solutions. And if they don't want to listen, they don't want to do it.
Totally. And we're all in this to help people. And there's going to be legitimate differences in professional opinion that we're just not going to be able to get around. And I think we just got to like accept those for what they are. I think, I remember that a few of those first like Joel Seedman posts where he's talking about like, he stopped squatting to depth and he hasn't got a cold in like 18 months. I'm thinking like, this is almost like, this is so comical that I don't even know what to do with it. And like, part of me thinks that like, hey, he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows that's not true. Like, there's no way he thinks that's true. Come on. Like, you can't. Yeah. Like, it's like, to each their own. The people, if he does that kind of stuff and ultimately gets someone lifting weights that wasn't before, I mean, like, to each their own.
Yeah. Is it that bad? I mean,
what's worse, right?
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line? It's I don't know. So I guess that's my take on this stuff, is that like, the gatekeeping. And I think we all just need to do a better job of, and I mean, that's not to be like, it's not, just complete blind positivity and stuff.
Yep.
That's not
Yep.
what it's about either. It's just about like, there's things that we need to accept that are different, and we're all in this together. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a difference between having a conversation with someone and then guiding them through that conversation, explaining to them why they may have shortcomings in an area or why their opinions about something might be wrong, or blanketly dismissing them because they don't meet some criteria that you've applied to them.
Yeah.
Right. So I think having the conversation is far more beneficial than, like you said, the social media call outs, the dismissal. It's like, maybe we should just be talking to each other more and helping each other out.
Totally.
Cool. All right. That's it for
Thanks for
our time here, Mark.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm glad we were able to connect and talk about the nitty gritty, but also the big picture. So thanks for having me on. Yeah,
no problem. So if people are looking to get in touch with you, where can they find you, and when is the next intake for the Dr. Marc method?
Our next program is going to start on September 15th. If you follow me on Instagram, MARC Morris, you can check out some of the stuff and what we're all about, and have a bunch of different opportunities to connect and learn more in both like free opportunities, but as well as that next intake for the nutrition coaching course in September.
Yep. I did one of the earlier iterations of the course. I can definitely say from personal experience, it's a great course. Like, people should do it. I refer people to it all the time. So if you're halfway interested, anyone that's listening, you'd certainly be in more than safe hands under Marc's tutelage here.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Sam.
No problem. All right. Well, thanks again, Marc. Looking forward to talking to you. I'm probably, we'll probably chat throughout the rest of the day anyway. So appreciate your time, man. And I will talk to you soon. Cheers.
Sounds good. See ya.